in the interest of setting those values and those standards of much more. Internalizing, I think, a lot of what needs to be done, because you cannot, it is never the job, and this is a little bit coming from my own perspective as a GC, it's not the job of the lawyers or the CEO or whoever the key managerial personnel may be. It's really about the success of any compliance or that compliance culture is when really every single colleague starts internalizing and understanding what they do and how it connects with the larger picture. And last but not the least, I think there was an interesting idea and a little tip that at the end of the day, it's also our question and our ability to be able to help as professionals who are working in this space, to give people the connector about why it would be beneficial. So sell the idea. Sell the idea of compliance, why that whole headache and that pain might be useful, what it actually means to people to have to do something like this, and how it may affect the larger picture. So I think, thank you all very much for your participation and for throwing words. I think there are lots of examples, and a personal request, I don't know if it exists, but maybe community sharing of ideas will possibly spread wider in the culture. There was some talk we were having about social media and what have you. So, maybe if people would like to create those communities, at least I think there'll be a lot more of consistency in the same things that everybody's talking about. So thank you very much to each of the panelists and for all of you to have engaged.
Thank you to all of our panelists for an inspiring session and for sharing their plethora of knowledge. May I please request you to wait for a few seconds to just accept a token of gratitude? Mr. Anuj Kaul from Legacies. Can we have one more round of applause for everybody? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. A wonderful session like this leaves everybody wanting for more. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an entire afternoon and an evening planned for you all. Post our second panel discussion, we will be having a live session across the seas where Mr. Ramesh Sharma will be interviewing Mr. Richard Bistrong on anti-bribery and compliance issues. I definitely request everybody to please be there for the session at 4:40 p.m. sharp. Before we move on to our next session, I would quickly like to thank our sponsors. Our event sponsor is the Coupon Company Private Limited. Our associate sponsors are Victorinox India Private Limited, NSTL E-Governance Infrastructure Limited, India Rating and Research, SBI Cards. Our knowledge partner is LexisNexis, Legal Magazine is Elephant Design, and our fraternity partner is Indian Corporate Council Association. Going on to our second panel, may I request Mr. Sandeep Parekh to please join me on stage and moderate this session. Mr. Parekh is the founder of FinSec Law Advisors, which is a financial sector law firm. He was formerly an executive director of the SEBI, where he headed the Legal Affairs and Enforcement Department. Our next panelist is Ms. Bala Deshpande. Ms. Deshpande joined New Enterprise Association India Private Limited in 2008 as Senior MD. She is also an independent director and board member of Future Retail and Info Edge. Our third panelist is Dr. Rajiv Uberoy, who is the head of the legal and compliance team at IDFC. He's got over 30 years of experience in the financial services space, along with a deep understanding of all the facets of the business and detailed knowledge of compliances with regards to SEBI, RBI, and company law regulations. Our next panelist is Ms. Shalini Kamath, who serves on the advisory board of the Trust for Retailers and Retail Associates of India, which is an NGO. She began her career working with the governments of Botswana and Zambia on several development projects. Our next panelist is Ms. Shabnam Siddiqui, who is an academic practitioner having 16 years of experience in gender, peace, and governance work. And finally, our sixth panelist is Mr. Pashupati Gopalan, who has been with Sun Edison since 2009 and is currently president for Sun Edison Asia Pacific region. Prior to Sun Edison, he has worked with Cypress Semiconductor as Global Vice President, Strategic Marketing and Business Development. I welcome all of our panelists, and on to you, Mr. Parekh.
Thank you very much. So we are going to wrap up slightly faster than expected. What I'll ask all the panelists is just give some opening, maybe two-minute thoughts on their thoughts on compliance in the financial sector, because that's the theme. We are not going to expand it beyond the criminalization, which is the stated theme, but we'll talk about other aspects of violations and compliance themes within the financial sector. So I'd like to ask all the panelists to give the opening thoughts, and I'd like to ask Rajiv to kind of give his thoughts about compliance by choice, which is the theme.
Thanks, Sandeep. After such an illustrious panel and the discussions in the last session, one finds little difficult to take it further and add more juice to the discussion around here. But having said that, taking cues from the last discussion where we were, I strongly believe, and it's my belief, that being compliant is something which one or every individual is committed to, and so is a corporate. And if you really want to understand why compliance, and if you look at from a business point of view for a change, rather than looking with the glasses of a compliance officer who always says you have to do because that is his bread and butter. But even from the business point of view, there is enough empirical evidence available that the listed companies which are compliant, and not to name the one name which people have been aware of, and many others I would say, the market gives a huge amount of premium to them. So from a pure business point of view also, it helps to be in compliance. Also, in the same breath, I can say that compliance is a cornerstone of ethics and values of the organization. The culture which many of us were alluding to in the last session, that we should have the values and ethics and culture of the organization which allows you to be going in the right direction. And I couldn't agree more than the fact that the tenor has to be from the top. And that's very important, and I can assure you, most of the businessmen from the companies all of us work in, and one more interesting point, most of us who are sitting here and discussing about compliance have been brought up in an environment which is compliant, has been brought up in the companies which we respect for their compliance. So that becomes a part of our DNA, what we have developed over a period of time. Also, from the business point of view, the customers also value compliance. It's very easy to say that the customer also wants to cut corners. Today, even the customer is aware of compliance because he understands it's in his own interest. Next, the staff. People is the most important resource most of the companies have, especially in the service sector where I come from. Even the people who work for you feel more comfortable when the company is on the lines of what it should be doing. Reputation is most important, which comes across it. And finally, I would say that if all this is done appropriately, I'm not talking of the externalities. I'm saying if I have to run a company, these are the benefits I get out of it. And last but not the least, I think the CEO has a good night's sleep if all these things are right. And that can only come if you have done the things right. And if you feel that there is something wrong, I'm sure people get used to doing wrong things. But you certainly, if you are a conscientious person, you may find it difficult to have a good night's sleep if you are not being on the right track. That would be my starting comments, where I strongly believe that it's the corporates, the firms, and the value they get out of being compliant, which is important, which should motivate them to be on the right track within the boundaries of the regulations. I'm not saying there's a one straight line which has to be drawn, but all the regulations, and believe you me, I mean, Indian regulations are the most prescriptive and the most broad laws and regulations. Because I mean, if you have to make a law, then you go to 18 countries and pick up the law, and we are bright in drafting things if you're coming from south of India, and you make the best law which is available, and it comes to 580 pages. We never thought of its implementation. We say, no, the rules will take care of it. So point I'm trying to make is, it's good to be compliant, it's helpful to be compliant, it's a business, positive business decision to be compliant.
You know, before I give my comments, which is the 2 minutes that you've asked me to let me make, I come from financial services, right? So there's a disclaimer I want to make. I'm not a lawyer. I have nothing to do with compliance, very little to do with the legal counsel. And so whatever you would hear is primarily what my experience has been as fairly senior management positions that I have held. So I see compliance at a level which is at a, if you actually want to be in business, you need to be compliant. If you want to create long-term sustainable businesses that run for generations, there is no choice for corporates but to have a culture which is a compliant culture. And if you just see some of the very recent examples where an automotive company, Volkswagen, Nestle with their Maggi, financial services, look at Lehman, look at Bear Stearns, look at organizations that have just disappeared because they did not have, or they did not put in structures or systems that could create compliance in not just the regulatory terms. I don't mean it, and from that, it is compliance to ensure that there is interest of all stakeholders that an organization touches are taken care of from that angle. If you look at it from that angle, it is a business imperative if you want to be. So that's the first piece that I want to say. The second that I look at is that in my mind, compliance has actually about 4 constituents that need to be taken care of when you're looking at it. So one is the governments, the regulatory bodies that take care of and ensure that there are laws that are put together. So that's one. The second compliance resides with the boards of organization, because they are the ones that have to ensure that there is a direction in which the organization is going. So there's certain responsibility that rests with the boards. The third constituent in my mind is the organization itself, organization is nothing but its people. So it is the leaders, the managers, the senior top management that run an organization. What do they do? How do they build a culture of compliance? So that's the third constituent. But one of the last ones, which is the last constituent, is the individual himself. You can put together whatever you want to, but it is that individual that is sitting. So let me give you an example. Sitting at a trading desk, let's say a brokerage company, sitting at a trading desk, the judgment that he or she needs to take at that point in time, which is going to ensure whether the tilt of the mind is towards doing something which is right or towards greed or non-compliance, just changes everything. So there are these four constituents, and I think as compliance people and as organizations, you need to address each of these to see how can the flow and interplay between them can create not just organizations that are compliant, but even nations that move up. If you look at our reputation in corrupt nations, we fall where we are today, which is shameful considering the brain power that and the human resource that this country has. So it has to begin and play across all these four constituents.
Should we just use this one? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shabnam Siddiqui, and I represent the United Nations Global Compact. For most of you all who might not be aware about the UN Global Compact, it's a compact that businesses around the world came together in the year 2000 to commit to doing better business. Kofi Annan, who was the then Secretary General, said that because since business is a part of the problem that the world is facing, business has to be a part of the solution. And so the Global Compact was formed in 2000 with 9 principles around human rights, labor, and environment. By 2004, they realized that none of the principles had achieved much. And so in 2004, the 10th principle of anti-corruption was included into the UN Global Compact. And since then, we have done major inroads globally. The topic of today's conference is extremely pertinent, as other panelists have pointed out also, because I think first of all, let me congratulate the Legacies team for 2 things. One is, especially when you have a compliance event, a talk, a panel, it is not as houseful as this room appears to be, and I know a lot of effort must have gone into it, so congratulations to the organizers. And second and most important is the topic of the conference, because most of us here, or almost all of us here, are in some way associated with compliance and have been part of regulatory bodies and all that. And there has been a fatigue with regulation in general. But at the same time, this entire new avenue of compliance by choice is most important, because none of us would disagree that compliance is important. How do we do it? Where should we go about from here? Is what the crux of the debate from now on should be. Especially important in this is that the United Nations was following the Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015, which just were completed, not achieved as much targets as it was. And in the last week of September, the United Nations throughout the world has agreed on a new set of goals that's called the Sustainable Development Goals. While the Millennium Development Goals were set about by country heads and had targets that were more utopian and maybe not as practical, the Sustainable Development Goals has been through dialogue in all the countries over a period of 3 years. And that is why it's for the first time that any UN development goal also has the concept of anti-corruption and compliance as part of the agenda, which has not happened before. So the goal number 16 of peace and justice that is part of the 17 goals talks specifically about compliance and specifically about compliance by choice. So I think we have already entered a new scenario setting, and this particular conference goes ahead in that direction. In India, the Global Compact is part of the UN, but we operate out of 135 countries. But in all countries, because as you realize, businesses do not like very strict external monitoring. So the Global Compact is registered as an individual entity. In India, it is registered as a society. But we have 350 plus top businesses, both public sector companies and private sector companies, who are part of the Global Compact. The 10th principle on compliance is always the most difficult, not only in terms of regulation outside, but also in terms of getting the compliance and vigilance officers in most enterprises are not the most liked people, even within establishments. Forget about an external setup. And I don't think it is their job to get liked also. But it is a tough battle that they forge within the companies, and such kind of external hand-holding is what really does help move forward. The topic that we got today for this particular session also was specifically compliance by choice in the banking and financial sector. And I think that's one of the major sectors, especially after the meltdown of 2007 and 8 that has happened globally. There's been more focus on the banking and financial industry on how they are implementing the different policies. And as we, I think, go within the panel discussion, maybe we can cover specific aspects of that and other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor to be here and share the panel with such eminent people. I'm not somebody that manages compliance. I run a business. I'm from the infrastructure side. SunEdison is one of the world's largest renewable energy companies, and we're about 55 years old. We're an American company, publicly listed. So, you know, our journey in India began about 5 years back, and India essentially became the headquarters, if you will, for emerging markets. So we built our business in many countries in the world, many of which are very challenging countries from a compliance perspective. You know, South Africa, Thailand, Philippines, and several other countries, and also some better countries in some sense, more evolved, like Japan and Taiwan as well. So, you know, our experiences in India have been that, unlike some of my other colleagues who came from the US and set up businesses in India, the parent probably had a formula, whether it's Colgate or Babcock and Wilcox and other companies, or Merck. In our case, we were the first silicon manufacturer in the world. But the renewable energy business is relatively new. So when we set up our business in India, it's not like the company globally had a framework of compliance or what needs to be done. So what we developed in India is actually all by choice. You know, nobody really taught us, or nobody handed a book and said, this is what you need to do when you go set up your operations in India. You know, our operations in India were the first group globally that has a compliance group that we set up, and we requested our CFO to take the role. But I think it has to come from within. I think as has been mentioned many, many times. And every day, being in the infrastructure business, you know, we're at any given moment, today if you look at it, I think we have about 52 power plants under construction in India. We're the largest solar energy developer, builder in India. And it's a nightmare. The number of issues you face on compliance and corruption is really, it's almost a battle every day, right? And we walk away from many, many opportunities. We've had problems with some energy ministers, some energy secretaries, corruption issues. So I think the challenge is, I think you have to have the resolve that I'm not going to become a victim, or I'm not going to become a slave to a business goal. And this may not be understood by your board members sometimes. Your global CEO may not understand. They are sitting far, far away. And I think we have to have the resolve and say, we will walk away from business, come what may. I will fight. I think India, I would say, is one of the best. I mean, I've traveled widely. I've been to 75, 80 countries, and I've done business in about 30, 40 countries. And today, we probably run business in about 10 odd countries where we've built from scratch. And I can tell you, India is one of the most, it's one of the best run countries. And I'm comparing many other countries, like even Japan and Taiwan in the basket where we have experience. I think India is a land where the law works. You know, you have a recourse. There is a court system. You know, I also operate, interestingly, in China, which is in some aspects it's almost like a black box. You know, it's very hard for a foreigner to go operate in China and appeal to the government and expect a fair process. Whereas we've been very successful. You know, we've had to. I hope there's no press here, right? All right. So, you know, we've had to pick up fights with the Gujarat government, you know, with the utility of the Gujarat government, and the Gujarat energy regulator awarded the results in our favor, and then we also beat them at the appellate tribunal. Now we're choosing to fight them in the Supreme Court. So the point I'm saying is, it doesn't happen in many other countries where you can fight the government and expect the legal system to be fair. So I feel that it's a wonderful environment in which we operate, where more of us should take the initiative that we will do whatever is right, day in and day out. And it's not going to be an easy journey. The more examples we set as the organization that we build and we run and we manage, we have hundreds of employees and thousands of employees that see us. They will, wherever they go, they will take that forward. And there are many things we do. For instance, the law does not require us to give paternity leave. But it's important for us that, when a wife or a wife delivers a child, we want to make sure that the husband is there for the family for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever the time may be. Sometimes we give a flexible, we have a rule where every 2 weeks a person is allowed to take a flexible working day off, because people have to attend to domestic chores and it becomes difficult otherwise, right? So there are things which I think each one of us should go over and beyond what is written in the law. And by the way, I think Suhas will tell you this. One of our core principles has been to build accountability in a person, you need to measure and review that measurement. Unless you do that as a business person, as a CEO of the company, if you're not measuring and you're not reviewing what is being measured, it's impossible to really run an accountable organization. So I think the tools that Legacies has built for us is very timely and useful for us to at least stare at how many different ways we're not complying is a starting point. We cannot start improving things unless you become self-aware of what you need to do to turn all the reds and oranges into greens. And it's a journey, and like the earlier colleague from the food industry was pointing out, you might comply today, but tomorrow you may not. So keeping the tempo and keeping the pace by ensuring that you have an accountable process is definitely challenging, and it's definitely worth it, because you can sleep peacefully at night as a CEO. Thank you.
Bala, your thoughts? You do a lot of measurement, I'm sure.
Sure. Thanks. So just to give you a context of where I'm coming from, I work for NEA, which is a global fund. We have about $17 billion of assets under management, and basically we are into investments. So, so the context is that we do not have compliance as a choice. We choose only extremely compliant companies, which means that before we do an investment, we spend a significant amount of time checking and paying lawyers like you a lot of money to check for compliance. We also have on our cost, a person who's hired to check the compliance on a regular basis, in fact, monthly basis, the compliance of our portfolio companies. We also, thirdly, have a huge material breach, and again, I'm using legalese because this is the forum, material breach governance, which means that a lot of them are related to non-compliance. So we, in some sense, are enforcers of compliance, and of our portfolio companies, we really, really wish for compliance as a basis of of making a choice. We do not touch any company which throws up an issue during the diligence stage. So that is the extent to which this topic is important to us. So here are my views, right? I think if you were to look at the constancy of intent of somebody who wishes to be compliant, it's very high. Therefore, is their compliance 100% always there across time and across situations? Not necessarily. So this is where we as board members, as investors, repeatedly tell them that please come to us as soon as you have an issue, because we are not, today company law doesn't allow us to have the liberty as independent directors or nominee directors, the lack of knowledge, right? So it is that accountability, that responsibility of surfacing issues to us which would lead to non-compliance that becomes extremely critical to us. So for us, we try and keep that two-way communication going. Is it enough? Not at all. So do we lose sleep? Absolutely. But I don't know what the solution is. I mean, as I was listening to people around here, sometimes I feel it's a collective responsibility that we have lost sight of. We are sitting across two sides of the table, arguing about things that maybe are not very important. So, for example, not putting a board in Marathi and making it a non-bailable offense, isn't that ordinate? Is a question I'm asking. Maybe it's very critical to somebody's life, but is that inordinateness really a responsible action on part of the regulator? And the other question that I have is to the business community and entrepreneurs. You justify everything as on the basis of survival, or if I didn't do down, the business will go down. But hey, if you had thought about your about the outcome of your actions a priori and planned for it, would you have been in this situation? So I think I don't have an answer. All I know is that as investors, we are constantly on alert. We are constantly vigilant, and we also know that there are different parts of the world today. If I look at a new age company, there is hardly any compliance requirements. We have invested in a renewable services company, and I can completely appreciate what you're talking about. So it's also to do with the fact that there are some companies which have archaic rules. There are some sectors which have no rules. So I guess when you're looking at compliance overall, I would agree with all what the panelists say, but I'm also saying that how do we collectively come up with a enabling environment which will help 100% compliance?
So let me start with you, Rajiv. Follow-up question, and since we're talking about the BFSI sector, there are, of course, as Bala said, there are many sectors which are completely, which have grown the most, in fact, IT, for instance, which are completely devoid of any regulation, including the legal profession. Many professions are, in fact, very lightly regulated, and therefore they've grown very rapidly. As opposed to that, you have shops and establishments which go through 30 to 40 licenses to even open. And the most regulated is, of course, your sector, which is the financial sector. All the people I speak to say the boards spend 80 to 90% of their time doing compliance, and there's almost no time left for strategy and business development, really. So, I mean, what is your sense of, with your vast background, do you think we kind of too focused on compliance, or you think that maybe there's still some way to go?
Sandeep, talking of banking and finance, it will be uncharitable to say that the Indian regulator is very intrusive. I've worked at least in companies which have been US based and in England and Singapore. Everywhere, as far as banking and finance is concerned, the regulator is what it is. The good thing or a bad thing in Indian regulator is that he's still